a very exciting panel. We know we've got a lot of folks from the industry in here as well, and I'm pleased to be joined by esteemed guests here. So I'm going to set the stage a little bit here. A persistent question for all of us in the cannabis world is what happens outside of the dispensary and what's possible, right? Kind of what are the next evolutions of cannabis? We've seen in Vermont, a lot of you have been here for many years and have been coming to this convention since 2018, CBD only days, right? So we've seen things evolve quite a ways, and now we are actually able to do regulated sales. The next kind of challenge for us, and a big challenge for the industry, is how can we bring the industry into more compliance with social norms, especially around other regulated substances, now that we have at least dipped our foot into the world of regulated sales. We know everything is not perfect, we know everything is evolving and changing, and there's a lot of stuff we can and cannot control. But what we all set out to do is imagine how could we possibly, within the current frameworks that exist, satisfy the requirements for security, for staffing, for inventory tracking, all of the things that some of you know really well go into a legal cannabis transaction. Right? So what we did is we all started talking, and for a little more historical context, I've been talking about consumption for a long time. That's another big part of this that's sort of unspoken. A big challenge historically with legal consumption, I'm not talking public consumption, I'm talking legal consumption in a controlled environment, has been the lack of a sale. Right? When you go to a wedding, when you go someplace, you buy alcohol off-site at a festival, it's a licensed product, it's insured, it's regulated, it's served by a trained professional. Right? Now we know cannabis is not like alcohol, it's way safer, I think most of us prefer it. However, we know that we have seen a framework in which alcohol can be sold off-site, and we think that cannabis can follow a similar path. Not because we want it to, but because for the rest of the world out there, here is a model in which you can sell a controlled, regulated substance, satisfying all of the legal requirements in different scenarios. Right? So, if we need to figure out legal consumption in regulated spaces, we first need to figure out legal sales. Right? You don't go to a beer garden and bring your own beer. You don't bring your own flask in when you go buy a beer at the festival. You know, maybe you do, right? It's never going to be perfect. But for the most part, right, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here, and we're not trying to necessarily get away with anything. We're trying to take this step by step and break it down into components. That's really what this is about, is what are the different components that are required to make off-site, eventually consumption, but really for our focus, off-site sales possible. So, very, very pleased to have these folks with us. They have donated a lot of time, equipment, energy, expertise to be here because they are folks who are actually in the industry. So, you know, what we're proposing is not certified, it is not compliant, it is not something that's going to be the exact model that's going to happen in the future, right? What we want to do is take a crack at actually manifesting this and putting this out into the real world and blocking it out and saying, hey, what's another step? What can we build on? What works, what doesn't? Do we need solid walls over there? Do we need more space between the entrance? Do we need a different camera orientation? We're never going to know until we see it, right? So, all of these people on the stage with me, cannabis pioneers who have been walking the walk for a long time, and have done so again. So I am just very proud and grateful for all these folks for donating their time. I will talk a little bit about consumption, and I know Tim will as well. But for most of the purpose of this, like I said, we're talking about off-site sales and really how to go through this process and the different components. So there's a lot of people who are going to talk here, and then we are going to, for the last part of this, actually go over into that area and demonstrate, show people the different components, and simulate what this would be like if instead of, you know, air in this jar, it was legal cannabis. So I would like to turn this over to...
Can I ask a clarifying question? When you say off-site, do you mean completely off-site or adjacent to a dispensary? Or
within the state of Vermont, you know, for now is kind of where we're at, right? I mean, to be determined. Right now, anything only can happen inside of establishments.
Okay.
Right? So we'd like to at least see if we can get to that next step of, and you know, we're not trying to set up remote dispensaries. That's not the point of this. We're coming at this from the scenario I proposed to these folks was, what could you do with 2 staff people, an hour or less of setup time, right? And something that could actually be done without internet, right? So thinking about a wedding, thinking about a farmer's market, thinking about a festival. And Jesse will talk a lot about this, somebody who's really committed to the cause of making sure this is something that's accessible, right? If it costs $20,000 to do this, you know, most of us, maybe some of us, most of us aren't going to be able to do it. So thank you for that clarifying, you know, question. I want to let Tim from Vermont Normal come in here and kind of help set the stage a little bit more, and then we're going to get into the layout of what we've actually put together out there, the different components, the security, and the sales. So without further ado, and I'll play on this computer and get the graphic up too. Timmy, thank you.
Thank you, Eli. So really, I'm just sort of a facilitator. Hi, everyone. My name is Timmy Egan. I'm the new chapter director for Vermont Normal. I'm also part-time faculty at Vermont State University, where we actually have a cannabis studies program out of our Castleton campus. And I'm sort of going to moderate and make a couple comments. So I just want to welcome our panelists. If you could start by introducing yourselves.
Hi, I'm Bailey Evans. I am the owner of Higher Elevation, a retailer out of Morrisville, Vermont. I've been talking a lot at tourism events like the Vermont Tourism Summit, which was on Monday. And I think this is a really important thing that needs to happen for cannabis tourism.
I am Meredith Mann. I'm the owner of Natural Cannabis Retail, Cultivation, and Manufacturing. I come from, we were the first CBD company to have a catering license with the state of Vermont, and we're doing legal weddings and events, and I just really want to see cannabis normalized in a safe, productive way, and I'm here to help.
Jesse Harper, owner of Vermont Security. I've supported the cannabis industry since its inception here and frankly prior to its inception. I believe strongly that cannabis in this state can have an incredibly important economic impact on our state. And if we drop the ball on that, we've really dropped the ball. The snow is coming less and less. We're not going to be able to rely on winter tourism the way we have. And so we need to come up with something else. And I think that's probably more than anything why I'm here and why I've supported the cannabis industry, because I'm from the state and I care about this place.
And so what you're going to hear is actually they're going to talk to you about what they built, why they built it, and what we did, Eli and I, in more Eli than me, I'm more like your moderator and crazy idea guy at times, is that we wanted people who were on the front lines of dealing with retail to say, if you said to me, Tim and Eli, hey, there's an opportunity to create a, similar to a alcohol license, to have a craft brewer offer beer at a college reunion, at a wedding, at a concert, how could we do it with cannabis? And so we asked them to sort of build that out, which you'll see, and they're all going to talk about their each distinct aspect of how they approached it, from process, the execution, and the security. My point of view of why I support this and why from normals and even the university is, Jesse's very right, tourism is a huge tool for the state of Vermont, and because I live in New Hampshire and I see it. I see people leaving my state to vacation in Vermont because they want to make cannabis part of their outdoor experience, whether they're biking or skiing or hiking. I think what we're also seeing is that the state of Vermont struggles with keeping young people. So if we can begin to give other career opportunities for young people to enter into an industry that they like, that they want to take part of, that has a kind of aspect of business, that has an aspect of wellness, that has an aspect of compassion, that has an aspect of environmental engagement, right, agriculture. It's important to figure out how do we get those folks to come here or stay here. So by building this type of aspect of the industry, it expands the tourism opportunities, it expands the economic development opportunities, and it expands the opportunities for young people to say, there's more here to the state that I want to be part of. So that's my little soliloquy. So let's talk a little bit about the process of what you built, and I may just sort of ask some questions at a time. So Meredith, do you want to start by talking about what you built?
Absolutely. So we wanted this model to be transferable to both indoor, outdoor events, public events, and private events. So we took the concept of a 10 by 10 tent and tried to create a model that we felt was safe, compliant, doable, and easy. The first thing we did was make sure that we had all of our CCB compliance paperwork. When you walk up to it, we'll check your ID. We, as the ID checker, will also have a view of what's happening inside the dispensary and of the person in front of us. And then when you walk in, there'll be a table about consumption, safety, driving options, health warnings, all of the important public safety issues. We created kind of a mock safety form that's just about onset times and making sure all of those things happen. And then we're keeping it to a 4-person maximum. So if you have a group of 2 people, we'll let 2 in at a time. If there's 3 of you, but maximum of 4 at a time in this specific 10 by 10 space. It could potentially, again, this is just a model and an idea of the concept. So from there, we created with a POS a bartending station that I'll let Bailey explain a little bit more about.
Okay, so this works a lot like as if you were in a dispensary. If there's any display of product, it has to be in a locked, unaccessible to a potential customers being able to get to. For actual checkout procedure, they get the CCB flyer, they get their receipt, which, as you know, that's all pretty standard stuff. But the only new thing you're going to get is you're going to have an exit bag this time, just so that you cannot see. Because unlike when we do a sale in a retail place, in our establishment, they might be walking around longer. So to have it in a bag is just safer and you can't see the content.
Yeah, so we actually don't have those with us, but that is definitely the concept that we're going for in the end, is just a lockable exit bag, kind of more like you find in other states. Just specifically thinking about people being in a place where they might be being social still, they might want to put it down while they're having a drink, or they might have their kids around, and all of those things. So to make sure all of the important responsibilities are taken.
So we wanted to make sure that it was well structured. Jesse, do you want to talk a little bit about the sort of safety and security mindset you brought to this?
Sure. I think the CCB struck a good balance between, what's really logical and required to have a, verified, trackable, transaction in a retail environment. And I think, keeping in mind cost, right? And I worked a little bit with James on that when we were looking at the rules, and it basically just, I find it to be an appropriate level of security for what we're doing. I'm having installed and participated in retail for a while, I do find that the requirements make sense. And basically what we've done here is emulated those exact same requirements in an off-site environment. So it's really just like you would buy it in a dispensary, except in a tent. No different. So, yeah.
Do you want to break down specifically what's in that tower?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So right, about the tech stuff. So we have a rolling cart that is essentially an ID check station. So you walk up to that, someone's manning that station, and you check the ID, they're on camera. If you wanted to, you could show the ID in front of the camera with the person. It's obvious that that's happened, whether that's the right way to go. Again, this is all a prototype. And so that rolling cart has backup battery because if you're on off-site, you know, you could have inconsistent power. Someone could walk over some line that's strung and then trip it, you know, now there's no power. And so there is no security without power. And so we've provided backup battery in that unit, as well as AC power. There is a cellular modem that provides, you know, internet to the entire operation. That could be for the POS system, for the video system, any alarm components, panic buttons. These are all elements that we've sort of thought through that are in current dispensaries. And the unit is completely mobile. So you can just like move it around. The concept is to make it cost effective. We're hoping to get to somewhere around $500 to rent this unit for, you know, a day, an event. None of that is exactly sussed out, but our goal is to make it affordable. Vermont Security is not really vested in this as like a vertical that we see as like important for our business, so it's really just about supporting the cannabis industry. There's a video element just like is in a dispensary, so the transacting is all on there, like you can see who's there, like there's really not blind spots in this scenario. And this little mobile cart is very expandable. So right now we have 2 cameras on it, but we could go to 3, 4, 5, 8, 10, it really doesn't matter, it's easy. This could potentially be a larger security element for an event, you know, housed in this form factor. Yeah.
The only other thing that I thought was particularly brilliant about this was what good is a camera in happening, you know, when you're getting robbed in real time, right? Knowing people that this has happened to, like, great, now we know who did it, right? So I love the addition of the panic button. That's something Meredith has been involved as a dispensary driver, brought a lot of perspective to that, where they wear body cameras, right? And we have different technological solutions. Maybe it is a body camera, but panic button is something that I hadn't considered that Jesse brought to the table, which for somebody who's out there in real time really addresses that security concern. And just another thing on the topic of security too, and just other variables, right? Cash on site, right? Cashless purchases are happening a lot, right? A lot of folks, if you've been to a wedding before where the bride and groom pick up the tab, you're not paying the bartender at all, right? So it could be more like a pre-purchase happens at a dispensary in advance, and we're talking about a license to transfer something and disperse it to people who are already of age, right? So we have a lot of variables and a lot of elements that we can play with, including the security program, which can be expanded. And, you know, what works in a 10 by 10 tent for 50 people or 100 people at a wedding probably doesn't work on the waterfront for 10,000 people, right? But identifying the components, okay, is it 3 cameras per 500 people, you know, and 2 security? Like, we can figure this all out, and we have, I think, the metrics. We have all the different levers which can be pulled.
I think one of the parts that is the realistic perspective of this, right? You're going to go out there and go, oh, it's a 10 by 10 pop-up tent. But no one's going to do that. No one's going to build a dispensary in a field for one day. So we have to be realistic about how can this be affordable for someone to do this as a business venture, but also apply all the important metrics and milestones that have to happen for safety and security, and be able to take care of not just the customer's safety, but also the business practices of the business entering into this opportunity, right? Make sure that their system of checking in customers is safe, their safety for the security of their product, safety and security of their revenue. So the idea that this could be a pre-purchased model, right? A lot of you now may pre-buy when you go to a dispensary, and you just pick it up. You pick up a package when you go there. So the idea that this could be done off of a POS system, especially at a smaller, more private event, like I mentioned, you know, whether it's a wedding, whether it's a college reunion, and then in a festival model, right? It could be more cashless. So you say that in advance, so folks know that they're just tapping, you know, tapping into the system in advance, so they can order. Okay, and there's a couple milestones that are important, right? That you're able to pre-establish if someone is of age to do that, you know, when they order, and then you can verify that when they come up. I think another important aspect is that it actually helps the business owner manage inventory, so they're not bringing too much out into a location and going, all right, I got to keep an eye on that stuff in the van while I'm over here trying to sell it, and me and just another staffer. So we're trying to figure out what is the most efficient way to do this and test it? And so that's why this has been an important aspect to work on, because I think it's something of value for the entire state.
And there are definitely easy ways to add, if there was a door on a van, or a little lockbox where the cash or, you know, or a product were kept, like there could be sensors that link to that, you know, like tag that with a video feed. There's a tremendous amount of integration that could be relatively easily done to deploy this pretty quickly. Our model is like plug and play. We have a prototype out there, but the end unit would just be like, it's pretty dummy proof. You know, you put it up, you connect it up, you push power. You know.
And to be really clear, we want this to be a model that is not just for dispensary owners, and that is mandatory to bring other cultivators and manufacturers in, so that everybody's getting the face time with our community, just using the dispensary as the compliance vessel and safety.
I think and I won't speak to, you know, I think our idea is to try to establish this, and the idea is that right now the person behind the counter is a retail staffer. That makes sense, you know, just like it would be a bartender at a wedding. Does that mean that's the only person in the tent, right? If I'm a grower, I would like to be there as well. Does that mean maybe in the future that it can be another licensee who can be there, who's done the training requirement, right? Whether that's a grower or a manufacturer or others, right? But a logical first step is the people who are already trained, who are already certified, who are already trusted, insured, etc. Which is why this was the initial approach. Not because it's the final, you know, that's not the conclusion, this is the beginning. Along with that, other parts of this issue that we've discussed that are really important, and then we want to take some questions, and then we'll go do the show and tell. The question of a sales plan, that's something that's been part of all the legislation that's been discussed. I don't know what's going to make it out of the meat grinder at the very end, but the idea that part of this would be a sales plan. You know, we're very concerned about the idea that this is a way for retailers to just monopolize a new part of the market. So we feel strongly that having a sales plan requirement where maybe it's a percentage, 50% of your products have to come from other sources, 25%, 75%. But building into that permitting process a sales plan that demonstrates how you, the licensee, are going to ensure that there is a diversity of products, producers, including different sizes in there, right? We can't be too prescriptive, but we want to make sure that there is a requirement that you're not just doing this for to sell your own vertically integrated stuff, right? So something we've taken really into consideration. And also just being realistic about where this is possibly going to happen, right? I mean, if your town doesn't have retail sales, probably not going to be an option initially. Maybe in the future, your town says, hey, we don't want a dispensary downtown, but we're okay with you doing weddings. And maybe in the town of Stowe, they only have catering events and they never have a dispensary, right? So where this happens, if you're going through alcohol, the town clerk would stamp your permit, right? So there would be a local check as well. And that would mean that the venue has told you where, you've drawn your map of where exactly your tent's going to be, and your sales are going to be, your plan, all that stuff. You've gotten a signature from a local government official too. So being realistic, this is not going to happen even in the best of circumstances, it's not going to happen everywhere, and it's probably not going to happen quickly. And it's going to have to get pulled off successfully, probably a lot for any towns that don't allow retail sales to ever consider it. So this is the first step of a long journey, but we are really trying to consider all of the different aspects, including, again, the equity of how do you have a retail-only permit and make sure that growers aren't left out, right? And how do you have a pathway to consumption, and how do you have a pathway to potentially even direct sales, whether it's a grower or a manufacturer or other entities in the future we haven't even imagined. I'd like to open it up to questions, unless you guys want to add some more. I think we should.
I'd like to just quickly say the response to that, like if that ended up not being part of that, with the equity of like essentially cultivators and other manufacturers getting, you know, being able to sell there too, or you know, have their products there, I would unilaterally withdraw my support without that component. So I think that's really important to understand for equity and inclusion for all.
Yeah, I think that's the general consensus, is that we feel that this is something that can be a game changer for the industry, for everybody that's involved in the industry, no matter what portion of a licensee that you offer. So we probably should take some questions.
I have a question. Have you guys discussed this with any insurance providers? This model and what that looks like?
That's the biggest hurdle of this, but I know our insurance provider was willing to discuss it. And I think it depends on where they're out of too. Our insurance provider's out of California, not out of New Hampshire. I think if it was out of New Hampshire, it would not happen. So that is the next step, and it is going to be the biggest hurdle for any retailer doing this, for sure.
Yeah, I think an insurance company is going to want to see sort of a template, and they're going to want to see, okay, what does this look like from a piece of legislation or rulemaking? Because for them, they're going to want as much concrete information as possible before they can actually, assess it and be able to put a.
Well, from a catering perspective, like when we hosted block parties and whatever, the caterer has that liquor license to be able to sell and distribute alcohol outside of their physical premises. So, kind of modeled like that, essentially. I mean, I don't know how much this thing costs.
It's the liquor, so if Whistle Pig was coming to your event, Whistle Pig would have to go to your town, get the temporary permit and license to sell.
I just meant from an insurance perspective.
The question is really
Sorry.
what your individual providers require and what the Vermont state law requires. Only one of those we can possibly control. So understanding that the insurance requirements in this industry are very challenging already, it'd be nice if the letter of the law, said a reasonable amount of insurance or insurance that covers your products and staff. If you're a retail insurance, that might not fly with your insurance company, but it'd be really nice if the state didn't force you to jump through whatever hoops, because they're gonna be significant, like $2,000, $3,000, right? Like that's for a one-time event permit. So if we make a market for insurance, for cannabis event insurance, they will fill it. So I would like to not make that new market if we can through whatever, wording that is. Everybody's still gonna be very highly insured. I'm sure you're all still paying money for insurance, but it'd be nice not to create that new market.
Questions, Bill?
Yeah, excuse me, question for Jesse, the security cards, and maybe I'll conceptualize it a little bit more once we walk through, but do you see, and I'm thinking about this in the context of like a farmer's market, would you see each 10 by 10 tent having to carry one of these security cards, or do you think it can be built where, if there's 10 vendors, you can do one or maybe 3 and cost share that amongst multiple vendors?
Yeah, there's no reason that can't happen, and that would be like more cameras, so it might be,
Sure.
a little more, elaborate setup, but it could all be run off the same unit, and, yeah, absolutely. You just have to control the physical, an entrance and an exit.
Right.
You can't have people coming in the sides, and, so you ID them right there, and then, you ID them again at the sale, if that's, what the current rules are.
Totally, and again, let me see it again.
Yeah, but no, yeah, one cart should be fine for an entire venue of a controlled area, no matter what the size is.
Question right there, and then come from.
What's the security? I did a delivery and there was a robbery at the dispensary while I was there. Police were called, they actually never came.
Is this in Vermont?
Yes. Yeah, this was a few months back in October at Grassley, but yeah, they never.
This was in Burlington?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they're like,
I was wondering if it's great that there's a home button, but,
pretty good point.
I mean, is there the potential to maybe get in touch with the police department, the high council, let them know, like, hey, there's gonna be this event, and, kind of a system or a protocol to let them know, like, maybe on higher alert, maybe have, your extra volunteers, or whatever, because it just may be targeted. We're seeing now, cannabis is a cash crop, like, people are targeting it, farms, dispensaries.
Totally.
I'm nervous when I'm pulling up and I'm just in my car, I take out a box, like, they can knock me down.
Totally.
So things like that make me nervous now that I never really thought about before.
I think communication with law enforcement ahead of time, or other security, if there's like, if it's a large event, there might be private security there.
I'll say from experience, paying off the police is the best feeling of all time. It's so nice. In 2018, I just want to say in 2018, we did work with the Sheriff's Department in Lamoille County. And they asked us to have an extra sheriff on staff. We said it's $75 an hour, but we'd like you, we'll only charge you 60. And we hired 10 hours of sheriff security. And then a week before the event, they said, we think you should get more security, and said, okay, we'll hire another sheriff. And so we had full protection, we had full cooperation, coordination with them, as well as the rescue people. That was another one. First aid, so having a safety plan, as part of your security plan, I think that's something that we'd like to think could happen at a basic town level check, right? So they know that you've made, did you have to get a form signed by the sheriff? Did you have to get it signed by I say the sheriff too many times? You have to get like a form signed by the hospital people, right? Or the search and rescue or whatever. It's like those other costs are things that we've done that before. And again, like if you can just pay the cops, it's so much easier.
And again, this model is, potentially public, private, small, large. The bigger it gets, the more important that becomes.
Yeah, I think with events, I used to do events, I think after a certain number of people, it's mandatory to have a food service go out.
Right, and one thing that this is what I'll say as well, and why I'm a fan of the body cam, being a previous delivery person, is it really commands respect. People look at you, they see that, you walk in, and you have that on, it can be a component of that can be really helpful, because I see exactly where you're coming from, and that's why the way that we're doing this is really important to me as well.
Yeah, so one other element of this is if it is a pre-buy online, there's no cash. Like cash is more interesting than weed.
And inventory can be scaled too, right? So if you're doing, a 100-person event, it's $5,000 in inventory, right? Something like that. Or like we said, doing the pre-purchases before, right? Take the wholesale part out of it, right? And now we're just adults distributing pre-purchase
Order pickup
products, yeah.
And if you do larger events usually have some protocols. I've produced a variety of events of thousands of people. You're going to have EMTs there. You're going to have safety and security there. You're going to have volunteers for parking and transportation. I think what Meredith talked about in terms of having ride options and transportation options is also important.
Lodging options.
Lodging options. So those protocols will be put into place in terms of sort of best practices. That's sort of why I and Normal University is part of this, is how can we help, where can we add to that, which is some sort of structure and logic. But again, at the end of the day, it's the idea to think, how can we execute this in the simplest form, so cost effectively someone can enter into doing this. If we make it too expensive to do, then why are we all here? So I know you had a question in front, so we don't want to ignore you.
Oh, I was just curious if you guys also plan to include working through airflow and climate control, because a lot of cannabis products are very climate sensitive or can be somewhat climate sensitive, and especially as summers are getting hotter in Vermont, that is something that you have to take into effect with, I guess, with also health and safety concerns, because making sure people, aren't passing out in your entirely enclosed tent because state law requires it to be entirely enclosed.
We are presenting it as a three-sided model.
Okay.
I think this particular tent, is a little bit four-sided, but it is a three-sided, on our plan, it's a three-sided model with stanchions that just sort of separate the exit and the entrance for airflow.
So if you want to just take a quick look, go ahead.
Yeah.
So if you want to talk through this, Meredith?
Yeah, so you can sort of see right in between the entrance and exit sign there, we have a stanchion that we would just put there to block it off, so people are very clear about where the entrance and the exit is. And just in my working through this with heat and temperature, and also having catered cannabis events in the middle of the field, in COVID, in 90-degree weather, dry ice is your best friend. So there are absolutely ways to do this, and not only will we have to do them, it should be mandatory to do so.
Thank you.
Are you going to talk about the tourism, what they
I
told
was
us?
just going to say, there's also coolers that plug in, so if you do temperature control coolers and have drinks or concentrates, under a constant temperature.
Okay, yeah.
And something else to consider what this actually looks like in practice. At the Tourism Summit, a lot of these folks, I want to give her a shout out for the Vermont Wedding Professional. She's actually, I think, Tectonic, they're tier 1 as well. The wedding folks don't want flower anyways. You know, they want gummies and drinks. And I really don't want to introduce the concept of a cannabis event permit that doesn't include flower. But in reality, as far as what the actual catering business is going to look like, you know, flower is probably not going to be a major part of that, unless you're really cool weddings with really cool people. But just on the ground, that's what the tourism people are saying. You know, that the flower, the smoke, that is still something that they are concerned with. So, you know, for them, it's really, you know, the edibles and the gummies is probably how this actually unrolls first on the ground.
So I think you all want to see it. So
Yeah, let's sell some things we eat.
What we have. Let's see it.